Om Ajnana-timirandasya Gyananjana-salakaya Chakshura-militam yena tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripasindu-bheva-cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Hare Krishna. So I'm going to apologize in advance. I'm ill-prepared to give this class. Apart from that, I have some issues dealing with in old age. So sometimes when I'm making a point, I forget what I'm going to say. So you can listen very carefully and remind me what I was going to say, if you can figure it out. Is that all right?
Yes.
Yeah? All right, well, so we were talking about 10th canto. What are the verses?
86, verse 4 and 5.
Okay. On the board here. Tatra Vai Vashikan Masan Avasit Swartasadaka Pori Sabajito Abhikshnam Ramananjanata Chasa. We'll do the other one. There's no purport for this. Ekada. Is that on there?
Yes.
You got it?
Yes.
Ekada. Griham. Aniya. Atijena. Nimantriyatam Shraddhayo Paritam Bhaiksham Balena Buhuje Kila. So text 4. Tatra there. Vai indeed. Varsikan of the rainy season. Masan for the 3 months. Avatsit he resided. Sva his own. Artha purpose. Sadakaha trying to achieve. Parai by the people of the city. Sabhajita, honored. Abhikshnam, constantly. Ramena, Lord Balaram. Arjunata, who was unaware. Cha, and. Sa, he. Next verse. Ekada, Griham, to his, Balaram's home. Aniya, bringing. Atiyena, as a guest. Nimantriya, inviting. Tam, him, Arjuna. Shraddhaya, with faith. Uparitam, presented. Bhaiksham, food. Balena, by Lord Balaram. Bubuje, he ate. Kila, indeed. Translation. No purports. Well, one small purport. Translation. He stayed there during the monsoon months to fulfill his purpose. Lord Balaram and the other residents of the city not recognizing him, offered him all honor and hospitality. Translation. One day, Lord Balaram brought him to his home and his invited dinner guest, and Arjuna ate the food the Lord respectfully offered to him. Purport. From the explanation of Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti, it is understood that Arjuna, in his sannyasi role, had just finished the 4 months vows of the rainy season and could now again accept general invitations from the householders. Thus, no one would have suspected any unusual motive in his visiting Lord Balaram at this time. I'm going to read the next verse as well. You don't have to put it up. So, Pasyat Tantra Mahatim Kanyam Vira Manoharam Priti Yut Fulak Sanas Tasyam Bhava Shudam Manodahi. There he saw the wonderful maiden Subhadra, who was enchanting to heroes. His eyes opened wide with delight, and his mind became agitated and absorbed in thoughts of her. So, it's an interesting pastime that Krishna, the Supreme Lord, has an opinion opposing his own. He holds both opinions. As Balaram, he's got one view, and as Krishna, he has the other. Same Supreme Lord, arguing with himself. So, this is transcendental nature. It's there's etiquette that can be followed, but it can be broken also. And Balaram had decided that he was going to give Subhadra in charity to Duryodhana. And Duryodhana was not the most popular person on the planet. But somehow or another, Duryodhana was always favored by Balaram. When he learned to fight with the club, he got all the finesse in the art from Balaram. When the Battle of Kurukshetra was going to start, he took his leave. He didn't want to get involved because he didn't want to be contrary to the Pandavas, because his brother Krishna was their great friend. So he couldn't fight himself. So one part of Krishna, as Balaram, he went to another place. And Krishna stayed on the battlefield, but also didn't fight. That was one of the conditions, that if you want me, but you can't have my army. So Arjuna, in show of devotion, he wanted Krishna. He didn't care whether he had his army or not, because he knew that Krishna was the main basis for their relationship. And Krishna always favored Arjuna. And here we see again that favoring Arjuna. He had somehow or another heard about the beauty of Subhadra. She had heard about Arjuna's beauty, and there was an instant reaction, instant attraction. This is because we experience this in a perverted way in this material world. As soon as a young man or a young lady becomes eligible, that means they've reached the age of puberty. Then the hormones kick in, and they are automatically attracted one way or another. And in this day and age, of course, that attraction is fanned. They fan the flames of sexual desire. Everything we see around us is all advertising. The women are dressed attractively. I remember many years ago in New Zealand, a reporter came. So she was dressed nicely, but fairly conservatively. But in the course of the interview, then it was mentioned that women like to attract the men. They dressed in a nice way. They put on lipstick and scent, and so many things to make themselves attractive to some man. And they're very happy if they catch some man. So that desire to dress attractively in the material world, that's lust. I want to show myself off, become attractive to some man, and then go on with him. And no restriction. After a few years, when the attraction wears off, then it's either the hard work of bringing up a family or divorce. All right, finished with this one, let me attract some other one. So that principle of attraction is there in the Supreme also. Arjuna was so attracted to Subhadra, he couldn't think straight. He had taken a disguise, living as a sannyasi for the 4 months of the rainy season. Then everybody thought he was such a nice sannyasi. So there was no thought in Balaram's mind that this person, this sannyasi, has come here for an alternative reason. I've invited him for lunch, so he's coming. So that was it. He just thought that was the only purpose. He couldn't tell that Arjuna had another purpose, ulterior purpose. He was thinking, yes, I'll accept this invitation. That'll give me free access to the house of Balaram, and then I'll be able to see Subhadra in secret. So how does God keep a secret from himself? Balaram had one idea, Krishna had another idea, and again he was favoring Subhadra and Arjuna. So Krishna always favors Arjuna. He's his best friend. He's actually part and parcel of Krishna. And they're always together wherever they go. So this is another pastime where Arjuna is getting the patronage, if you like, of Lord Krishna. And Balaram, he's the one who is the kind of fly in the ointment, as we say. Krishna has his plan, but Balaram doesn't always agree with that. So that ability of the Supreme Lord to play dual roles, that's personified in Krishna and Balaram. They're somehow or another at odds with each other over certain issues. So he was there in the house of Balaram, but he was looking at Subhadra. And Subhadra was looking at Arjuna, and they were completely fixed on each other. So what to do? So Krishna took it in hand later on. All right, you make this arrangement. Subhadra is going to a certain temple for some pujas. So you just wait with the chariot. When the time is opportune, you kidnap her, take her away. Don't worry about what Balaram says. Just do it. So he did. He captured, because that's a Kshatriya spirit, to capture some attractive woman by any means possible. So Arjuna, he was already fit. He could fight off any army that had been put up by Balaram to keep Subhadra under wraps. There was a risk, he knew, that when she went to the temple, then something might happen. So he had his armies all waiting, and Arjuna was waiting. And then when the time came ripe, then he rushed forward, he dragged Subhadra into his chariot, and off he went. And Balaram was very annoyed. He was very annoyed. He didn't like it, that had been duped. There it's mentioned here, invited him Shraddha, with faith. So he's put all his faith in Arjuna as the sannyasi, and then that faith was broken. It was spoiled. So how do we feel when we make some arrangement with someone, favor them, and then they do something which is completely against your desire? You break faith. So once that faith is broken, it's very difficult to restore it. People just don't trust you anymore. So we see that in modern life. People have no faith in anything. They've become faithless because they're always being let down. The leaders that they put in charge, they're always doing things undesirable. It's like nowadays we've got so many wars that are going on. So there's some breakage of faith, and it's very difficult to get them back together again. It's like an egg, when it gets cracked, you can't put it back together. So Shraddha means the beginning of our spiritual journey. If we can develop some faith that this person is a fit person to take shelter of, to get guidance from, then I can make some spiritual progress. If somehow or another that faith, that Shraddha, is spoiled, it's so difficult. Then you have to go through the whole process again. Just like we've had various problems sometimes when a leader, especially the leaders, instead of doing the right thing, they get overwhelmed by the situation for one reason or another, and they do something which is against the relationship. It's spoiled. Then it's so difficult to bring that faith back into their heart. So we have to, as devotees, we try to follow standards. We try to keep up our relationships and develop them on the basis of faith. Rupa Goswami says that Ado Shraddha, in the beginning there's faith, and on the basis of that faith, then Sadhu Sangha, next thing. Satsanga, that the faith develops to a desire to want to be with similarly minded persons, have an interest in spiritual development. There's whole, because Prabhupada said that was the purpose of his establishing ISKCON, was just to give people from all over the world the opportunity to develop their faith in the Shastra and Guru. And when they get to a certain point where they're fixed in that faith, and they're keeping regular association with devotees or sadhus, then in that way, then bhajana kriya, you can make a commitment that yes, I like this philosophy, I like these people that are practicing it, so let me also take the next step to commit myself. So this Shraddha, very important. We spend a lot of time trying to cultivate a situation where a person's Shraddha, faith, becomes, or it matures to the point of that you want to give up everything else and take up spiritual practices. So this is something that you learn as we go along. We're not always that good at being reliable. Sometimes we waver, but we have to understand the basis of a person's attachment, what they want from their lives, and try to help them to develop that. There's going to be disappointments. Balaram was disappointed because Arjuna broke faith. He came there under a pretext. So association has to be with genuine followers, seekers. Not that we accept anybody and everybody, but we have to check them out, so to speak. And by hearing and discussing, then one gradually develops this faith, this kripa, bhakti. So our ISKCON movement, I think, has done a remarkable job in some respects. I know we've had lots of problems, but those who are sincere, they stick it out. And then things gradually become adjusted in favor of your spiritual development. When it's coming up, when Balaram saw Arjuna, he was going off with his sister. He'd made one arrangement and now he was violating that trust. So he got very angry. He was going to go and attack the city where Subhadra was and somehow or another take it back. But he was spoken to by Krishna and he managed to persuade him that, no, this is all right. You go along with this. So then, having had his faith restored, this is the desire of Krishna. This is Arjuna. He's not an ordinary man. He's Krishna's best friend. So instead of attacking him to restore his prestige, instead he sent so many elephants and maidservants and other gifts to the newly wedded couple, and he gave them their full blessings. So we have faith. We have faith in what Krishna supplied to us through Srila Prabhupada. This is the Kali Yuga. It's very difficult to live peacefully and faithfully, but it can be done if one is very Krishna conscious. The obstacles that we face, they'll be destroyed by Balaram. He's the spiritual strength. And by Balaram's interaction, then Arjuna became elevated. So we're very fortunate in this faithless age that we got a transcendental personality like Srila Prabhupada. I was in a conversation in January of 1977. Prabhupada had received Ramakrishna Bajaj and his wife and brother-in-law, Sriman Narayan. They had, a couple of weeks before, in late December, they attended a program called the Gita Pratishtha. And it had been organized by Vinoba Bhave. He was a contemporary of Gandhi's. He was part of the freedom movement. He had an ashram just near the Gandhi Sevagram ashram in Warda. And Bhave and his associates had become concerned that there was an infiltration of communism and godlessness in human society, especially in India. And they were looking for ways and means of counteracting that. So, because Prabhupada had been so successful in preaching around the world, they invited him to come to this Gita Pratishtha. So it was composed of various spiritual leaders from around India. Swami Chidananda from the Divine Life Society was there, and so many others. And Vinoba Bhave had told them, sit together and figure out how you can popularize the Bhagavad-Gita. That will help to save India. So it seemed like a nice sentiment. And went for 3 days. Prabhupada knew very well that everybody there was a Mayavadi, were not Bhaktas. And he told me at one point when we were waiting for Prabhupada to be called to the main assembly of the Pratishthan, they were a little late in calling him. Prabhupada was waiting to go to they had a hall where they had some workshops. So they came up with 4 or 5 different ideas, and then Prabhupada was supposed to come in and he would give his opinion about these proposals. So Prabhupada had spent 2 weeks prior to this in Hyderabad at the farm there. And every afternoon he was calling Jagadish Prabhu, who was his secretary, to come and write down different notes that Prabhupada was preparing for his meeting with Vinoba Bhave. Bhave was stone deaf. So Ramakrishna Bajaj, he's a wealthy industrialist. They have the Bajaj fans, scooters, all electrical goods, very wealthy. So they were backing Vinoba Bhave because Bajaj's father had been one of the freedom fighters. So they were all a close-knit group, Gandhians, and they were doing altruistic work. One of them was Gulzar Nanda. He was developing Kurukshetra. So he invited Prabhupada to come and get some land there and have a Varnashram college. Ambarish Prabhu had flown in, and he had given Prabhupada a check for $150,000. And he came with Prabhupada to Kurukshetra. Sri Kirti was there the year before, I think, right? 74. Yeah. So we went there. It was my time. It was the first time I ever traveled with Prabhupada. And Ambarish was there, Chaitya Guru, Gopal Krishna, and Hansaduta, Harikesh. So that was something that this group was doing. They got some big grants from the government, and they were redeveloping the whole Kurukshetra area. And if you go there, it's very nice. I mean, they did a very good job. It's Brahma Sarovar, it's a huge place. And they had an Ayurvedic pharmacy. They grew their own herbs for the medicines. They had a huge Goshala. And Prabhupada visited all these places. And then he finally ended up at the university. And he asked them to put some of his books in the library. So that way then, this is like an example of the people that Vinoba Bhave was trying to inspire to spread the teachings of Krishna in the Bhagavad-Gita. That when Prabhupada sat down after his visit to these different places, he came back to the hotel, and I gave him his massage out in the backyard, and Gulzar Nanda came to speak with Prabhupada. So he was keen that Prabhupada would buy some land in Kurukshetra and help with the development. Prabhupada was equally keen that they give us it. So anyway, they were talking. And as always, Prabhupada was quoting Bhagavad-Gita. And he made some point, and he quoted the verse Vivasvan, about Vivasvan and Isvaku and Manu, how this science comes down from the sun god. And finally it's spoken by Krishna on the battlefield field of Kurukshetra. So when Prabhupada mentioned the sun god, Vivasvan, Gozaralal Nanda became very puzzled. And he said, well, Vivasvan, you mean that's an actual person? So Prabhupada said, yes, it's in the Bhagavad Gita. So it baffled Gozaralal Nanda. He couldn't understand how we could take that literally, that there's a sun god and a disciplic line that comes down from Ichvaku and Manu. And so he was bewildered. So that's the kind of caliber. These men were taking upon themselves to spread Bhagavad Gita, spread and popularize the teachings of Lord Krishna. But as Prabhupada said, without Krishna, they had, his comment when we left the place was that they've spent so much money building this and building that, but there's not one picture of Krishna even, what to speak about a deity. There's not one picture. And this is where Krishna spoke the Bhagavad Gita. And these men are supposed to be promoting Bhagavad Gita, but they don't believe that there is such a person as Krishna. So similarly, later on, about a year later, then Prabhupada was in Wardha for this Gita Pratishthan. The same thing. He sat down and they gave him the list of things that they wanted to do. They wanted to start a library with a copy of every version of the Bhagavad Gita, or commentaries on the Bhagavad Gita, that had ever been published. So hundreds of volumes of different presentations, not presentations, interpretations of Bhagavad Gita. And of course, Gandhi was famous for having said that, I don't believe that there was ever a person called Krishna. That he didn't accept that the Supreme was a person, and he had his own philosophy, non-violence, which Prabhupada said was ridiculous. Because how can you get non-violence from reading the Bhagavad Gita? And the whole point about Bhagavad Gita is to be violent. So they had these different ideas, start this library, do some courses that could be studied in the schools in India. They could have some kirtan parties going around. So like that, they had different ideas. But Prabhupada had just spent 2 weeks with Jagadish writing down all the different points that he felt were important. That it's important to accept Krishna just as Arjuna has accepted him. And then he would quote the verse from the Bhagavad Gita and his purport. So like this, he made 23 different points. Modern civilization means digging your own grave. Then he gave the quotes. And at the end of it, then he had, I think, 4 or 5 different general points. At that time, there was an energy crisis in America. Fuel prices were going up and up, and there was a lot of agitation. So Prabhupada gave some comment that there's no such thing as wantage of anything. Everything's already supplied by Krishna. So anyway, Vinoba Bhave, later on, I think about 3 weeks later, we saw in the newspapers an article how Vinoba Bhave had decided to get liberation, go for moksha. So he was retiring. He said from any further dealings, he was going to retire to his ashram and try and attain moksha. But he made a point of saying that I'm not going to do it in the way that it's already traditionally accepted. In other words, he's going to concoct his own idea of moksha and how to attain it. So these people, on the one hand, they were allowing the Indian public to think of them as being highly qualified, saintly persons. But they have nothing to do with the actual Shastra. They have nothing to do with the real meaning of Krishna's words. So when Prabhupada came into the assembly, they read out the different items that they wanted to do. Prabhupada just, first of all, he had Jagadish bring out the folder with all the different verses that and points that he'd quoted, and he had Jagadish read out the first paragraph of each point, and then at the end of it, they started questioning it, and their main point was that how can you say that this is the only interpretation of Bhagavad-Gita? There's so many interpretations. So Prabhupada told them it's not interpretation, it is presentation. So the man he was trying to argue with him, he said, presentation, interpretation, it's all the same. You interpret the Sanskrit. Sanskrit's a difficult language. It's not easy to interpret. So there's bound to be differences. Prabhupada said, if you don't know the language, then don't try and translate. That's cheating. You admit that you don't know, but instead of giving a proper presentation and meaning, you want to change everything and put your own opinion in. So sometimes when Prabhupada got really annoyed, he would sit up straight, his back would be like a rod, and then he would get a little flushed, and then his top lip would quiver. And also sometimes his legs would start bouncing up and down. There's this interview with Cardinal Danielou in France, and they're talking about meat eating. And Danielou at one point says that, I don't think this is very important calculating. We should just, make our lifestyle based on other things. Animals don't have souls. That was his philosophy. So he was speaking, and you can see Prabhupada's there. His knee is bouncing up and down. He's getting really annoyed. So same with these people in the Gita Pratishtha. They started contradicting. They didn't like Prabhupada telling them that you don't know the Bhagavad Gita and therefore you're not qualified to present it. All your endeavors will be useless unless you accept the Bhagavad Gita in the way that Krishna says. You have to just hear his words and you take them as the truth. So they didn't like it. Some of them were calling out one lady from the TMs, I think, a young woman. Right from the get-go, she was inimical that Prabhupada had been given the center of the meeting. And she said something. Why do we have to accept what Krishna says? And she got so annoyed and she yelled out at one point. Prabhupada just told her, you just keep quiet. In other words, you don't know anything, so don't cause a disturbance. So anyway, the organizers of the meeting, Ramakrishna Bajaj and Sriman Narayan. Sriman Narayan was the former first chief minister of Gujarat. I think Gujarat was formed in the early 60s, not immediately, but as they started to divide up India into democratic states. So he was the first chief minister, important man. And he'd written a lot of books about Gandhi and Gandhiism and what have you. So they were kind of innocent. They didn't want to create any disturbances or offenses. So they were trying to settle the vitiated atmosphere from when Prabhupada came in and started yelling at them all, raising his voice. And they were saying, well, yes, Swamiji, that's all right, but now we should go on and you should tell us what you think about our ideas. But Prabhupada wouldn't let them off the hook. He just hammered them. So after about 20 minutes, and finally, Prabhupada could see he's not going to get anywhere, but he wanted to have his say. He wanted Krishna to have his say. So Prabhupada flipped the whole meeting on its head, from chastising everybody. Then he started suddenly making, like jokes, and by taking the focus off of the philosophical deviations, then he just made everything very light-hearted. They were relieved, Sriman Narayan and Ramakrishna Bajaj. And at the end of it, Prabhupada had them all laughing and, in a good mood. I'm sure you've seen Prabhupada do that many times. So, Madam Lhasa, she was married. She was Sriman Narayan's sister. She was married to Ramakrishna Bajaj. So they were all family. So she was so fired up by Prabhupada's presentation. And later on they showed a movie. At that time, Yadabara was just coming out with, I think they just done Brilliant as the Sun and some other movies. And when they saw that, they were so impressed that Sriman Narayan's wife, she was like a journalist as well. So she wrote a whole article about Prabhupada, about Western devotees, about Krishna consciousness, and she really got it down. It came out a couple of weeks later, and Prabhupada read it. He was very, very happy that she had actually understood what he was talking about. So they came to see Prabhupada, I think about the 8th or 9th of January. 9th of January. They came to see him in Bombay. And they had a long talk, over 2 hours. Still the same thing. Prabhupada was just telling them, you're the leaders of society. You have to preach the Bhagavad-Gita as it is. Otherwise you'll never be successful. And they seem to accept it. I don't know afterwards whether anything was done in terms of their involvement with ISKCON. But these were some of the most influential people in the country. And there's the leaders of society, Prabhupada said, have a responsibility to see that the message that Krishna is conveying in his words in the Bhagavad-Gita are actually true. So, if you don't have good leaders, then you can't have a good society. Be misled. People will become bewildered. They get their faith is disturbed. You can't cultivate any faith unless you show by example and by authoritative knowledge. So, sorry, we've gone a bit off track here, but Balaram was feeling very hurt. His faith was broken, so he became very angry. But somehow or another, Krishna managed to calm him down and convince him that this is a good thing. He knew that Duryodhana offering his sister in marriage, Balaram, offering Subhadra to Duryodhana was controversial. Everybody went along with it because he was the elder brother. But actually they were all thinking that this is not a good matchup. Duryodhana is not a good person. So in that way then something a little special had to be done to dissuade him from giving his sister to somebody that had been inimical to the Pandavas from the very beginning of their lives. So this was the solution. Arjuna went disguised. He was so expert in disguise that even after 4 months of dealing with him and inviting him to lunch, and that shows you how close they regarded this sannyasi, that Balaram invited him to his own home. And somehow or another, Balaram just couldn't recognize that this is Arjuna. He was dressed as a sannyasi. So it seems odd, but of course it's all, as Prabhupada says, it's for Leela, just to enhance the relationships. So they resolved it by kidnapping and then by negotiating an agreement at the end. So anyway, it's a nice pastime. So I'll finish at this point. Does anybody have any questions or comments? Yes. Don't you go to Prabhu?
So our books are full of philosophy and leela, and also you mentioned about increasing the faith, and then you have your guru and your personal attachment to guru. So how much jnana vairagya, we don't get vairagya unless we hear Bhagavatam, but that leela is attractive, but how much is leela? What do you feel is in order to increase our faith and our inspiration? Just Leela, philosophy, or personal service to the Guru?
Well, all of it.
All of it. Okay.
Prabhupada devised this song in such a way that it would happen automatically, that you hear and chant. That's the basis. And therefore he set up a strong sadhana for his followers. You go to other Vaishnava temples, nobody has the system that Prabhupada developed. And just like a simple thing, the Govindam prayers. Is there any other Gaudiya Vaishnava organization that has such a wonderful morning program? Get up for Mangalarti, chant, do your japa, come and greet the deities. Govindam Maripurusham Tamaham Bhajami. When Prabhupada heard that, he cried. When he first heard this recording. And then Prabhupada said that they should play it as the deities are opening. And when he first did that, he was in ecstasy. It was so wonderful. So it's a small thing, just playing this Govinda tune. But nobody else has it, only ISKCON. Prabhupada was very expert in devising ways and means for us to make it advancement without any austerity. Just don't eat meat and fish and eggs, just eat prasadam. That's an austerity, controlling the tongue. Actually, it's not an austerity, but it might seem that way if you like meat and fish and eggs. I have an old friend from my school days, Chris. We grew up together. We went to school together. We emigrated from England to Australia together. And I met the devotees on the street the first day we were off the boat from immigrating. And I immediately was interested in the Bhakti Godhead. And 6 months later, 10 months later, I joined the temple in Sydney. My friend didn't. He was sympathetic. We discussed all the different aspects about reincarnation and what Prabhupada was saying about yoga and in the Bhakti Godhead. But he wasn't, my friend wasn't opposed to it, but it just didn't strike him. He some years back, about 6 years ago, I persuaded him to come to India. We stayed for about 9 or 10 days in Mayapur. He came here. Actually, he and his partner, she had been to India once before. She liked it, so I took advantage of her liking it to invite him to come to India. He was my old friend, so I wanted to do something good for him. So he stayed a couple of days at the MVT, and one afternoon she went to look for him. He was not in the room, and she came into the temple, and the 24-hour kirtan was going on. So he actually sat down. He was not with anybody. He sat down and he started chanting with the 24-hour kirtan. So it was a good sign. He loved Mayapur. Then later on, I was in England, so he came to see me. And although he seemed to agree with everything, he just couldn't give up meat eating. He said, I love my meat. So I said, well, it's not, that's the problem, is it's not your meat. It's somebody else's. Animals. But he's so attached that for him it's a great austerity just to not eat meat. So that's the condition people are in. The Prabhupada, at least he gave us some principles. If we follow those principles, we're sure to come to the transcendental platform. We're sure to. Guaranteed. Shruti Prabhu.
It's an interesting point. Maybe you can elaborate on something. Just like Balaram has been when he listened to Krishna convinced him the same thing with Arjuna. Krishna lets them have their opinion, but at the right time, he shows the gospel value and what the Prabhupada had been listening. So that's a good example for us that if we have a different opinion, that we need to understand what Krishna wants and what is the best of that.
I only half heard that. I only heard half of that.
You only hear half of that.
Just like Balaram, Arjuna had his different opinion, and Krishna listened to carefully. But then he gave the truth, and both Balaram and Krishna were able to be convinced by Krishna. So is this a lesson for us and how we should start thinking? And Krishna allows us free will, but we have to be open to what Krishna wants.
I'm sorry, I'm just.
It's a little complex. Basically, Krishna didn't agree with Balaram, but after Krishna spoke to Balaram, Balaram agreed to go with Krishna. And Arjuna was also neglecting the instruction of Krishna. Krishna listened, but then he spoke to Bhagavad-Gita. Then Arjuna heard it, he surrendered. So that's a lesson for us that we should maybe hear from Krishna, even though how it might be different, but then after we hear from Krishna, we can surrender to Krishna. So.
Yeah, if you don't hear and chant, why would you surrender?
That's good. Jai Prabhupada.
Yes, all right. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama.